What are some signs that people are being mischievous, or other psychological tricks you may know? Never trust a quiet person. They are listening and learning, and that makes them the smartest person in the room. What would you say is the #1 rule for undercover agents? Listen, don't talk. Hopefully OP is still reading this thread. About a year or two ago there was an Ask Me Anything from another former CIA field agent who was releasing a book about his experience. He ended his Ask Me Anything after another poster made a comment something along the lines of oak or hickory, in reference to what type of wood he wanted his coffin to be. The OP replied to the commenter essentially telling him and any other former field agents who were apparently harassing him to duck off. Is it common for those who serve in the intelligence field to have a disdain for those who retire from service? You hit a very sensitive topic here. Well done. The short answer is yes. When an agency person leaves, they essentially become a punching bag for anyone still on the inside. Their disdain increases exponentially if the leaving officer writes a memoir or takes on any kind of public image. In many ways, it's an insider shaming tool to keep people in place. It is also a bit of a sucker punch because anytime an officer leaves and succeeds, it makes everyone who chose to stay in place second guess their decision. So there is a balance to be met. But as far as violence against one another, that would be contrary to every fiber of any public servant. We can disagree, we can fight, but we don't harm one another. That is justice doing the enemy's job for them. How often does America have a near miss that the general population is completely oblivious about? I think more importantly America often has huge victories that Americans can never hear about. Talking about how CIA thwarted a massive attack in Chicago or prevented a terrorist attack at a concert doesn't make for good news. If anything, it incites fear and negatively impact the communities that were originally targeted. This answer is frightening. LOL. 2 questions. What are some key skills you'd recommend for someone wanting to pursue a career in intelligence? And what graduate programs would you recommend for someone in intelligence? Key skills would include mastering short-term memory and mastering conversational dynamics. As far as graduate programs go, look into anthropology, foreign area studies, and sociology. If you go into the hard sciences, you could also end up in intelligence but less likely in the field. What's the closest you can get to talking about a past mission without getting in trouble? And can you give us a story that gets that close to the line? I had to run counter-surveillance against a rogue state target in a third world country in 2011. I was supporting a second officer on the ground who had to do face-to-face meetings despite not knowing the mental state or intentions of the target. So this is the worst type of operation to run because we have no information and no control. But the potential payout is significant enough to outweigh the risk. When we got eyes on the target and observed their behavior, they were highly unpredictable, wearing winter clothes in a hot climate, appearing openly hostile and aggressive to strangers on the street, clearly disheveled and surly, because the operating window was so limited. We had to make a decision whether or not to allow the meeting or render the target separately. We ultimately decided to allow the in-person meeting in a public space, only to find out that the target wasn't strapped with dynamite or intending to kill our officer, but rather he had a nasty flu but was dedicated enough to talking to an American that he made the trip anyway. After he vomited on the officer's shoes, we were able to collect enough intelligence to put a dent in that rogue state's operational objectives for over a year. Was the agent compensated for his shoes? Asking the real questions. Redacted. In Narcos there were depictions of some CIA personnel having real disdain for the D in their war on drugs. Any of it true? Totally true. CIA is like the oldest child in a family. They believe they are the best, doing the most important work, and worthy of the most attention. And the funny thing is, CIA even has their own counter-narcotics elements to do D's job better than they do it. What news sources do you read that you find accurate? The Economist is great. I also like BBC. I steer clear of Fox, CNN, and NPR. How many times has the US been the bad guys? Another question might be, how many more times will we let ourselves be the bad guys? Are we supposed to believe all your answers will be truthful? Once a spook. You don't have to believe it for it to be the truth. Victory hand. Bro, you made it to the end. You're a ducking beast. I'll cut your deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. Moite. It's free and that's a great price. In your experience, who was the most professional foreign intelligence agency you engaged with? The Japanese. I know. Who even thinks of the Japanese intelligence service? What's your opinion on Eleven's recent campaign to expand Chinese influence by building rails and centralized infrastructure around the world? More specifically, how do you think they will leverage these projects to gain access influence in Africa and the Middle East? The Chinese are singularly skilled at building influence by investing in tangible infrastructure. Most investment in the US is intangible and not directly impactful to the majority of Americans. For that reason, we don't feel ingratiated to those investing the money. The Chinese know that building a bridge today means every person who crosses that bridge knows. Our friends the Chinese gave us this bridge, and that appreciation lasts for multiple generations. Which country regime is the biggest threat to US? For instance, North Korea, Russia, China, ISIS, etc. And in your opinion, how can we improve our safety within US borders? Thank you. Our biggest strategic threat is China. We are so tightly wound together and so fundamentally opposite that we are destined to conflict. But the more immediate threat to the US is our own infighting. When we kick and scratch at each other, we are doing the enemy's job for them. And I skipped your second question. Safety. I advocate that each of us has to become more secure individually. In so doing, our community will benefit in the aggregate. With data analytics becoming bigger every day, and our gov becoming more tech savvy by the minute, do you think an unofficial credit system will eventually make its way into the hands of the intelligence community for its populace? We already sort of have this with the clearance system etc. But I mean for those who are uncleared as well. If by credit you are referring to an unofficial clearance system, I could absolutely see it happening. The IC finds itself in constant need of experts far outside their talent pool. It would only make sense to use prevalent open source data as a way to produce low risk experts that could be called upon to serve in times of need. What advice do you have for those wanting to take their first steps into your career in today's world? Travel abroad, learn a language, and smoke pot now. You won't get the chance later. Why did you leave the CIA? I met my wife at CIA. She is also a former covert intelligence officer, and we were a tandem operating couple. When we found out we were pregnant, we had to ask some hard questions about whether serving a family or our nation was more important to us. Fortunately, the highly capable men and women still serving made it possible for us to choose our family. Hello Andrew, what are some clandestine skills that you can share that you utilize now in your daily life? Any misconceptions ordinary people have regarding the CIA? Thanks for the Ask Me Anything. I use indirect influence in my professional networking all the time. I also use quite a lot of conversational engineering when I am prepping for a negotiation. While these are all clandestine skills taught to us at the farm, they are also skills that are openly documented in the commercial and entrepreneurial space. What's your perspective on Russia's activities in eastern Ukraine? What are your thoughts on Russian efforts to build a military base in Venezuela after Venezuela defaulted on debt to Russia? Russia is playing a strong, long-term strategic game, and they are playing it well. While we call politics a gentleman's game, winning always requires risk. I think Russia knows that it can step on toes today and the world will forget in a few weeks. But by then, their position is stronger for the long run. What questions should we be asking as Americans that don't get asked enough? Why would someone ever leave CIA once they've been accepted and gone through the training? Is a government career as promising today as it was 20 years ago? What kind of food do they serve in CIA's cafeteria? Is the Publication Review Board reviewing everything before you reply to questions? Always curious how that worked. They are not, and that is an excellent point. I suppose we'll find out in a few weeks if you reopen this thread and everything is redacted. What was the hardest part about starting an espionage career? Is there nearly so much cloak and dagger as Hollywood shows? The hardest part is lying to everybody. It gets hard to lie, so you eventually just start cutting off relationships. You get very lonely, then surround yourself only with your peers, which is inherently risky for other reasons. There is a lot of cloak and dagger, but it's much less dramatic than TV portrays equals. How real and close to movies TV shows are CIA black sites? Not very close at all. Remember that black sites have to blend in with their surroundings, so you're not really going to be able to support a bunch of high-end technology and blacked out windows. Real black sites look more like the typical business centers can you find in any town somewhere between Chili's and Jersey Mike's.